Well, good morning. How are you all today? And welcome to Integrative Preparedness. Prepping is a total way of living. That's what I want to talk about today. I'm going to be reading something from one of our people, our patrons over on the Patreon channel. It's another one from Tom Usher, who I have designated our poet laureate. He is such a great writer. He brings in such thoughts. Some of his stuff I read it just makes you enjoy starting your day. But within that are many lessons of preparedness. So I'm going to read just a portion, not the whole thing. If you're with us on Patreon, you get to read the whole thing. But I'm going to read some of that because it really addresses this, and what I just said is a line from what he wrote, that prepping is a total way of life. Before we get to that, I know that a lot of people have been having trouble finding the member posts section. Patreon, for those of you on Patreon, has changed their format to a certain extent, and these places are always improving. They say they're improving, and until we get it figured out, it makes it, there's some bubbles we got to get through. And so I've heard a lot of you say that you haven't been able to find the member posts, which is what they used to call the community section. And it's very important that you're able to find the member posts because there are so many great posts there from our members, one of which is what I'm about to read you from Tom. But I found out, I was mentioning this to Mark, my buddy, who was over yesterday before we went out and started hanging Christmas lights. I mentioned that to him, and he says, here. And so he's my tech advisor, he and my son Aiden. And so he got on there and he says, yeah, he figured it out. And he says, okay, what the deal is, you cannot get that when you use the app, the Patreon app, it does not show. And I think Mike Hoskins has also said this. Mike is so smart. I don't understand everything that he tries to tell me. Mark was able to bring it down to my level. But I think Mike had said this, but he put it in the I think I'm not sure. But if it was in the member post area, then of course those who couldn't get to the member post area couldn't see it. Anyway, here's the deal as I understand it. That the Patreon app does not give you the link to get to the member posts section. And so you can't use the Patreon app. You have to go use your browser, either on a laptop, computer, or your phone. Use the browser. Go to patreon.com/integrative preparedness, I think is how it is. Or anyway, you should have it, but bookmarked. Use the browser, and then Mark says Patreon will try to encourage you to go to use the app. Don't do that, because then the app doesn't let you get to the member posts. I know. They're trying to make it better. What was in their minds, But for the most part, still, Patreon is a great platform, and they're a great place, and they're very responsive. And they're getting so many complaints off of this. I'm sure they're going to fix it. Anyway, don't go to the app. Stay on the browser. If you're on your phone, stay on your browser, and you will be able to find the link. And I forget where Mark said it was, but you'll be able to find it. Hunt around, and the link to member posts. And make sure that you do. If you are, first off, if you're not with us on Patreon, you are missing a lot. And if you are with us on Patreon, make sure that you come to the page on your browser, not the app. Okay, and also for those of you on Patreon who are following along the Audible, or if you're not, join us. I'm in the after I get off of this, I'll be reading the next section, the Audible of the Revival. That'll be on the Stonemont level on Patreon, and I'll be reading the next section of the Revival. I already did the first book. I already got the whole first book up there, the Reversion. First book of the Stonemont series. And these are my books. That's why I get to read them. Okay, I'm not reading somebody else's stuff. But the Reversion is up there. Now we're working on the Revival, and we'll go through the whole series: the Renewal, and Appeal to Heaven, the Blessings of Freedom, Hostages to Fortune, and the one that I'm currently working on when I get to that. So there you have it. Now I want to get to Tom to this his statement and supporting and how he shared with us his thoughts about prepping being a total way of life, and that is exactly how you need to think of it. Too many people look at prepping as a little bit here, a little bit there, and it doesn't come together. It's not integrated, right? This is why I called my business, my channel, my everything integrative preparedness. It should all work together, not just preparing you for an uncertain future, but improving your life today. I'll read you the first sentence here, or two. Yeah, I'll read you the first couple of sentences, and then I'm going to go down. I'm going to skip a lot of stuff, and but you all on Patreon, don't skip it. Go read it all, because I'm going to get to another part. He says, the garden season, apart from the horseradish and a few greens, has officially closed with today's hard freeze. And the wood stove season has commenced. Boy, that just makes me feel all warm right there, right? Not in a meaningful way, but we did fire it up the other night just to make sure that there aren't any problems. It was nice, as the first burn always is, to feel the house warming as only wood heat can warm it. Isn't that the truth? Those of you who know that. And even if those of us who have furnaces, I tell you, and which is most of us, right? Most of us. There is nothing like wood heat. And even, I tell you, I prefer radiator heat over forced air heat. I had an old house with radiators, and that place was so cozy, as opposed to the constant cycling on and off of forced air, which I have now. And then he goes on. He's talking about they decided to replace their furnace. All that's interesting, but I'm skipping now ahead. He says, now, this is back to Tom's. I suspect that my use of the furnace instead of heating with wood is probably grounds for the revocation of my Prepper Club card in the minds of some. He's being funny, but that's probably true. And I talk about this. Tom also talks about improving quality of life and being able to live well today. And no, I tell you what, it doesn't revoke anybody's prepper card because they have a furnace. And here's where he starts to give the lessons. We choose to live as comfortably as possible while we're still able to, right? There is no dishonor in choosing comfort over privation. Exactly right. There's this idea I mentioned to Mark that many years ago, before I got over this, I had a good friend of mine who was a psychologist who said, everything you do like it's penance. Well, I got over that. And that's the truth. Too many people in the prepper, well, I won't say too many. I don't think most of them do. But there is this overriding idea on the part of some who think that, well, privation is honorable or something like. I don't see it that way, and I encourage you not to see it that way. I don't think most people do. There is no dishonor, as he says, in choosing comfort over privation. We know that if all goes to hell, the money we chose to spend repairing our HVAC system will have been wasted. But then that money will probably have evaporated anyway, right? Along with the rest of our modern economy. So we might as well use it to keep the place in good working order while we can, and while the modern world is still working. See, that's it. To prepare, short term. While the modern world is here, let's be able to live well in the modern world while we prepare to live well when the modern world, if and when, goes away. Okay? That doesn't mean we don't prepare, he continues. We just view preparing as a total way of living, right? Not just a hobby or fantasy, right? Now, I know that that might offend some people. It shouldn't, but like a lot of things that I say offend people. A lot of people do just kind of piddle around in it, which is not responsible preparing. And you've heard me say that preparing Preparedness is responsibility. It's the ultimate responsibility. It's the ultimate in responsibility. It shouldn't be just a hobby. As he said, uh, we view preparing as a total way of living. So not just a hobby, but also not the fantasy. Not a fantasy of, oh, it's all going to come tumbling down and the monetary system is going to crash and your fiat money isn't going to make, be worth anything, blah, 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 blah. And so, we're going to immediately change our lives so that we are living in the privation that we fear will happen in the future. No. He said, we prepared for the inability to replace our furnace in the near future by replacing it now. That's right. You see, that is preparedness. That is preparedness. This mindset, now here's where it gets interesting and then it gets funny, because I can relate to this and many of you can too. This mindset has crept into everything we do now. Talking about he and his wife. If I need to change a filter on a piece of equipment, I buy a few filters instead of just one. We buy extra everything and store it away. Screws, nails, duct tape, baling wire, fabric, thread, and all the other basic necessities of life. I have old metal studs that I got off a demo job stacked back in the woods. A pile of fire bricks is laying out there too, along with old plastic jugs and fencing and so much more. I never wanted to become what I have become, a grouchy old man with junk piles behind the house. When I was younger and working around the places of Depression-era survivors, piled high with what always seemed like piles of never-to-be-needed junk, the mess drove me crazy. I always thought that it made more sense to just throw stuff out and buy what I needed when I needed it. Boy, how many of us have felt that way before we wised up, right? Now, though, as just getting the basic things is looking to become a major struggle, those piles of junk are making a whole lot more sense to me. I try to keep them in order, but in practice, junk is junk and it just wants to pile up. Still, I do try to keep it in check, unlike the hoarders I worked for, but I do understand how they got that way. I hate to throw away anything that I might need down the road, and the older I get, the less the mess is bothering me. That's true. When the trees leaf out, I can barely see it. He says, well, it appears to have warmed enough to make working outside a little more comfortable. The funny thing is that a temperature in the mid-20s seems cold now. In a month, I'll be running around outside doing the chores in colder weather and not even noticing it. We're going into the teens tonight. Guess I'll find out if I forgot to drain any water out of anything after that. Or most likely, I'll find out next spring. But I've got plenty to do between now and then. I'll worry about those leaks later. I say that Tom is a combination of Mark Twain and who else? Somebody else. Anyway, I love his writing. So I thought that I would. You all on YouTube got a rare treat there, being able to hear a bit of Tom's writing. But the lesson there is exactly right. Is that preparing is a total way of life. It's not something. First off, definitely not something to be done out of fear. Okay, and I've said that many times. It's not something because you're just afraid that, and you get in, and too many newer people get into this frantic, I've got to get this, I've got to do this. And even people who have been in for a long time kind of drive themselves with this fear, and then there are those who seem to have a constant need for a catastrophe in the wings, right? That only by addressing that potential catastrophe is their life fulfilled. And when you do that, you miss out on so much of what it is or should be going on in your life right now. As Tom said, there's no dishonor in being comfortable while comfort is possible. And developing that and maintaining that comfort can actually be an important part of preparing, right? So, by the way, I need to throw something else in. I was just going to say this isn't going to be one of those videos that gets a lot of views because, and that's too bad, because this is more important. This is more important than, oh my gosh, what Russia is doing and what's going on in Gaza and all that. Yeah, those can have major impacts on us down the road, and potentially devastating impact. But what we're doing on a daily basis is really what makes our lives either worth living or not. Right? I do want to say this. People have asked, and somebody asked me again the other day, do you mind if we share your videos? And I gave an answer. I says absolutely not. I wanted to clarify that and say, and because somebody followed up, and I don't even mind if you share Patreon videos, because you have paid to access that. Now, it would be one thing if you were just, giving out your logins to everybody so that they could watch it for free. That would be stealing, right? And I know that nobody here would do that. But if you share the occasional video, I think I don't have a problem with it, and because hopefully it will help the person with whom you shared it. And you're a part of the club, you're a member, so I have no problem with that done, occasionally. And it might enlighten some of them, and perhaps, they will come. It would be best if they come join us here, so they're not just slugging off of your dollar or your $5 if you're on the Stonemont level and listen to my books and such. It's kind of one of those things that it's a trust issue, and I like to operate on trust. Oh, but Craig or Steve, you can't trust people in this world. Well, you know what? I used to think that, and I've decided that my life is a lot better when I simply start with some trust. Not totally, not totally. I don't, let just anybody come in and watch my kids or live in my house, things like that. Nothing stupid. But when I don't start off with a triple dip of distrust, does that make sense? That I go on the assumption that people are going to act honorably, and I let them show me if they don't. So, and then when they don't, then I take care of it. But no, feel free to share. And as a matter of fact, I've noticed that YouTube is playing some games. So please share, give a thumbs up, comment, recommend the channel, stuff like that. I do this because I want to teach people. The more people I can reach, the better it is. Okay? So remember what Tom said, and remember what we talk about, and that is that preparing is a total way of life. It's not to be done out of fear. It's not to be done ad hoc on a day-to-day basis. It's not to be done as a hobby. It's not to be done as a fantasy. It's meant to be done and should be done appropriately, and if you're going to be successful at it, as a lifestyle that you hardly even notice because it's simply a responsible way of living. Okay, you all have a great day. Remember that this and all my videos are brought to you by my books, the Stonemont series. You can get them either through Amazon or the best way, through my website, stonemont.us. And remember that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. And I'll probably talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.